From an undisclosed location in the upper Michigan Peninsula, it's Beyond the Near Horizon, featuring Colonel Stephen Prather. Now here's your host, Colonel Stephen Prather.
Thank you, Stephanie. And a larger appreciation to all of you joining us for the next little while as we take another journey into the darkness, beyond the crest of the vanishing point, and infinitely onward. It is Tuesday, April the 11th. Warmest of welcomes to our Aries listeners, Tibetan opal birthstone, and if you're a devotee of the Cleveland Municipal Zodiac, unpolished granite, and recently refinished teakwood charts, also welcome. Before we jump into things, I want to get a public service announcement of sorts. I've got a few of these today. Out to the folks listening, especially those living near Ludington, Saturday night, we had aquatic real estate investor Frau Darek Stevenson on the show discussing his book, Puppeteering the Deep. I don't advocate for psychological warfare generally, but the idea of using deep water marionettes to taunt sharks with the faces of their prior aquatic victims is pretty awesome science. All the same, we got a frantic call this morning from Frau. It turns out he'd parked at a Harvey's Haven off of Highway 10 to join us from the payphone there. And you'll recall that he was demonstrating his HARM apparatus, HARM, or Humanoid Automation and Remote Manipulations System. And he was giving that a run-through on some of his fellow Michiganders in the parking lot. Gratifying, as it was to have children complain about gallstones and hear the congressman from that area moan the theme to Top Gun. I recognize it's pretty darn dangerous technology. Well, based on the message we got, it looks like a couple of twin preteens from Manistee got a hold of it. And man, are they on a tear. They seized control of the town council and a couple of sheriff's deputies. So, if you're driving in the area and you see full-grown, semi-nude men on the roadside with Peach Joan London window shears wrapped around their waists, best to go back the way you came. Now, on a far more pleasant note, we're pleased to welcome our guest tonight, Victor Morgan Green, a claims adjuster with a very special set of skills who applies those to great advantage for unintended endemic casualty unlimited out of Lansing, where he's worked for the last 20 years. If you have a C-band dish in the backyard, as Marisol and I do, you'll know his satellite TV program on Satcom 5, Channel 23, Trot to Glory. Sunday nights, right after reruns of El Coche Fantastico, the Spanish language version of the NSA-funded series Knight Rider. He usually throws down 4.5 hours of equestrian footage with some overlapping audio commentary, largely consisting of his reading of court transcripts from a flurry of clearly politically motivated defamation cases. And he's publishing a series of weekly articles in Cosmopolitan through May and June, which I'm looking forward to, drawing the curtain back on the International Cotton Advisory Committee's role in reducing the richness and intensity of the male orgasm. Needless to say, A can't-miss episode tonight, folks. You know, Victor always brings something extra, something unexpected. Now, going back to Marisol, around 6 months back, she and I were over at her father Thaddeus's poultry tent, freshening the duct tape on his impressive collection of Level B hazmat suits, which are really flattering to his figure, I have to say. All the same, Thaddeus got an 11-year-old named Benton out of Green Bay, who wears an eye patch. Good kid. And he's been helping Mari's pop scoop out some of the mixed radiological waste from under his carport. As most of you know, I like to keep up with the younger set, and I've decided to chat this kid up. The two of us pulled up a piece of calcified steer carcass to take a short break, and when you know, this youngster had one of these new Game Boy consoles. And what do we find splattered all over the screen with this so-called video game, Tetris? As we know, this invention of Alexei Pajitnov, well, it's nothing more than a digital infiltrator straight out of communist Russia, which we've talked about since it was released for the IBM personal computer a couple of years back. Come to know that Benton's father was a freelance exotic dancer and had regular clientele at the Nintendo branch office in Garter Falls. So, kid gets a crack at a device that I think only officially hit the market this week. And I've got nothing against portable video games in general, but I was extremely concerned to see Tetris, better known to us in the know as the tactical eavesdropping and tampering for Russian infiltration simulation. It's right there in the name, folks. All of that alive and well in this kid's hands. I feel bad for him. He's an unknowing pawn, if ever there was one. And kid already wears an eye patch, come on. Well, from everything we've been able to dig up, Pajitnov doesn't have any political affiliations officially. But let's be serious. You walk around Moscow long enough, the bear is going to ask you to dance. I don't know how many of you really put your arms around an animal, but I'm not talking about picking up Queen Penelope after she's wet the table runner. This would be bedding down with large critter, psychologically speaking. Bit of a tangent, but I'll never forget the common jackal I hunkered down with out on the Utah salt flats. Now let me tell you, you will recite poetry and contemplate the cosmos by the time you're done with that kind of thing. Emotional exploration aside, thanks to Game Boy mastermind Gunpei Yokoi, Soviets are going to be riding in our children's backpacks, right along with the contraband toothpicks and expired condoms. All is not lost, though. We've got a little strategy to share this evening. It's a meager step onto a pretty darn big stage. Yuri, if you want to give those folks down at the facility a ring. I'll tell all of you listening that as harrowing as this addictive Yokoi and Pajitnov Trojan time waster is, we have not sat idle on this show. I'm pleased as a rubber glove to announce that with help from aerobics student Calvin Brockett and his estranged wife Eloise, that we have developed what you folks in the service might call counter-psyops. Both myself and Yip, who does a fantastic job on our lawn, are testing this week, for the first time, a completely new and unique video game designed especially for the French PC, Balmovent, which we advertise on the show, as you know. The BM Type 2, for short. I believe you can also get one of these at any Pounder's Taco location in the UP if you order 2 of the deluxe taco platters and a carbonated beverage of your choice. As for the game, we're calling it Tax Station Nova Super Collider. I think when this hits the shelves in Indian River, you're going to be floored. Add to this, we've got Calvin himself on the line, who has also served as the primary engineer for this project, as I mentioned. He's going to share quickly here some of the technical expertise that went into this. Just amazing stuff. Yuri, let's pass that in.
You have a collect call from inmate Calvin Brockett at the Glowing Pines Correctional Center. Please dial 1 to accept these charges.
Here we go.
Colonel.
Calvin Brockett, thanks so much for taking time to join us.
My pleasure. Did you get the meal loaf I sent you?
I did. Some good sculpting, despite the circumstances. It was clear it had been taken apart and remolded, maybe a couple of times. But that did not dampen my appreciation. I could still tell it was supposed to be a man.
Oh, good. I was shooting for Lee Horsley. It's a little hard to work in that medium.
Well, it actually looked a little bit more like your standard cumulus cloud by the time I got a hold of it. As an aside, rumor was that if Matt Houston had come back for a 4th season, they were going to bring in Ray Walston.
No kidding.
I don't have to tell you what that would have meant.
Oh, yeah.
And we've got the game started here in the studio on the BM Type 2. Let me switch on the mic so the folks listening can hear the sound a little bit better, and you can walk us through a little bit of this.
Okay.
Top quality intro here. Loving this. This is a Burt Baccarat transcription, I understand?
Tony Tuberback, actually.
Tony, the drywall insulation guy.
One and the same.
He did a fantastic job on the couples commode in the outbuilding over here.
I'll say, yeah.
Now, this song has a chilling aura to it. For the folks at home, the main screen here has a kind of a thick border of dancing lights with tax station : super bladder. Calvin?
Yeah, we had my nephew do that bit. God rest his soul. He just heard it wrong. We'll get that fixed.
Right. So we'll read tax station Nova Super Collider in the center here, folks. Very impressive all the same. I'm going to just click start here with my computer mouse. All right. I guess we're outdoors now. Sort of a side view of us walking down a city promenade.
Right.
Little guy just starts walking. That's pretty cool. A lot of marble buildings, monuments. Where is this, Calvin?
Duluth, Minnesota. Use your right and left arrows to control your walk.
Man, this is realistic stuff here, folks. What is this little guy carrying on his backpack here?
That's a mole. The dimensions are a little off. My sister was recovering from eye surgery when she was working on it. We're going to fix that.
Sure.
Now use your S key to jump and your D key to fire.
Oh, wait a second. Mole like an infiltrator?
Like the mammal. This is a larger genetically altered version that decapitates humans.
Wow. So it does. Just cleaves right off that old lady. Now, in the background, that looks like the Washington Monument. Are you sure this is Duluth?
Yeah. Well, this takes place in 1997, so things have changed a lot.
Oh, where are we here?
Yeah, you're in the global taxation subterranean superstructure.
All right. Let me describe this for you folks. Dim sconces on gray walls. Just like Dr. Judy Spackle described in the Lucifer Tax. By the way, if you've purchased the 1988 edition, she's corrected the recipe for Navy bean slaw. It's a real winner. What in Hades is that thing?
That's former IRS Commissioner Jerome Kurtz.
Looks like he's been working out.
If you wait until he raises his arms up, you can run right through his legs to the next level.
All right, well, let's give this a go. Oh, man, everybody is hungry in this game.
Well, that's my fault. I forgot to tell you to press H before you ran through it. Calls on the spirit of Milton Friedman to coat you in an aura of economic freedom.
All right, well, that sounds good. Hey, Calvin, this whole thing looks amazing. When do you expect to see the final version out?
Well, I got a few more days in International Fabrics class here, and once I rotate on the kitchen crew, I'll have a little bit more time to wrap things up. I think we should be able to get done before my next parole hearing in July.
Great, that's great news. Calvin, thanks again for the shiv. You were right, that can open just about any package I can think of. Folks, when we return, birthdays and much more. Stick around. Are you one of the thousands of men suffering from the stinging pain and humiliation of a recent subscription to FaxFriend 3000? Did you find yourself adrift in the wafting layers of a seemingly loving telephonic relationship, only to be abruptly sent instructions for oven cleaning during what should have been the crescendo of heated digital passion? Perhaps you feel used or even manipulated. Well, we can relate to that on this show, as we've advertised the FaxFriend 3000 up until just a few weeks ago. And while we feel extremely victimized ourselves, we're thrilled to introduce the Fax Fatale 50, birthed from the same technological loins as the FaxFriend 3000. But this isn't your average lovelorn telecommunication device. Fax Fatale 50 is a different breed. Gone are the nights of pining away, waiting for the soft buzz of your fax machine to affirm your digital lover's affections. Fax Fatale 50 is unapologetically indifferent to your emotional needs, routinely reminding you that any attraction she might express is entirely at her convenience. She's not here to coddle you with comforting words. The Fax Fatale 50 is all about keeping it realistic and raw. Folks, whom better to endorse this no-nonsense approach than recently released retired structural engineer Archibald Archie Beam? With a life dedicated to the uncompromising rigidity of beams and girders, Archie describes the Fax Fatale 50 as refreshing and declares it the best value for $20 on a Thursday night he's ever encountered. In a world full of structural facades, Archie says, the Fax Fatale 50 is like a breath of fresh, albeit brisk, air. So if you're ready to embrace a new chapter in fax-based companionship, one that doesn't sugarcoat its transmissions, then the Fax Fatale 50 might just be the dose of honesty you've been searching for. Call 1-900-220-5120. Immediately after a short disclaimer read by retired quarterback Hipshot Johnson, you'll be greeted by the velvet-like voice of one of the dedicated Fax Fatale 50 operators, all of whom are named Shandy for your convenience. Setup will only cost you 26 low monthly payments of $96.99. That's only a quarter of the cost of the FaxFriend 3000. Fax Fatale 50 transmission rates start at $11.99, but do vary on relative humidity, so keep a close eye on your local forecasts. Mention Beyond the Near Horizon when you call, and you'll be entered into a sweepstakes to be considered for future eligibility in any discount programs should they be implemented by Infinite Endings Incorporated, in the event they are purchased by another corporate entity. Remember, in the game of love, sometimes the most reliable connection is the one that acknowledges its own intermittent signal. Fax Fatale 50, out the door while you're still dressing, won't leave you guessing. More evidence today that the world is on a different set of tracks, my friends. And it's clear our single gauge is headed towards a foreboding destination. Earlier today, for the first time ever, and you folks know I watched the game, that game hockey, Philadelphia Flyers, Washington Capitals, a goalie, Ron Labrum, I've got that right, scored a goal in the opposing net. A goalie, folks. I can't be totally sure, but I believe you may have been talking about Bonanza before we came on the air. Yuri? Was it? Oh. His dog. All right. That's weird. Well, something happened, folks, when they took that show off the air. Say what you will, but the Cartwrights had a magical familial unit. I feel like the sane ones of us are all Robert Olmsted in Innsmouth, with the chants of the esoteric order of Dagon ringing in our ears. It's pure chaos, folks. On a lighter note, let's get going here with birthdays. Ethel Kennedy is 61 today. Yuri, is she a Kennedy, or is that Chuck Bronson's kid? Right. Okay. I have to admit being a tad biased on Mrs. Kennedy, and thank you, Yuri. I'm not draconian about it, but I do value courtesy. And back in 71 or 72, I read that she was into arms control systems. So I sent her a set of schematics for my kite-mounted flare pistols to be used for crowd control, as there were just a ton of commies floating around at the time. Never heard a word from the woman. Some kind of response would have been welcome. And if I'm not the guy that gets to ice the eclairs, tell me straight, but, I can handle it. I did get notice of a restraining order years later, so I assumed that was her way of apologizing. Actor Joel Grey is 57. I'm looking at a picture of this guy earlier today, and you would never know he ran Mission Impossible for 7 seasons next to Peter Lupus and Marty Landau. What was that? Yeah. No, I didn't hear you, Yuri. What? Graves. Well, he looks half dead in his photo, so I'm not shocked. I saw him a year back or so in a documentary about an operative named Remo Williams, I believe. So I guess he was trying to break into acting. He looked pretty frail there, too, and Asian for some reason. All right, I might need help with the next one here. TV actor Meshach Taylor is 42. I know some folks have the idea that I'm some kind of network television Luddite, but I watched an episode of this Designing Women, which features Taylor, a little over 2 weeks ago. And I do have some notes to offer. Right off the top, credit where credit is due. It is impossible to tell which of these women are cyborgs. And before you start firing up your fax machines, I am immediately assuming, given that this program is set in the very near future, that we would have not seen the type of material or elasticity breakthroughs required to render what look like real biologically based skin at the level of articulation seen on the show. It's pretty amazing. So one of the cyborgs, Charlene, I believe, in the episode I watched, was marrying a human, which I think is pretty daring television on its own. The whole question of whether this is legal, of course, is, suspended disbelief. It's a decent episode, but what really corrodes my cast iron here is the lack of camera time for engineering. It's all very impressive visually, but so much so that an uninformed person, and they do not know who they are, would think this is a lighthearted sitcom. I mean, the illusion works a little too well. Now, I will no doubt get the lines lit up by the Feminist Apparitions and Advocacy League here, but I assume that Taylor's character, Anthony Bouvier, I think it was the puppeteer behind this Sugarbaker cyborg club. But I think that might be a ruse. Not to get too abstract, but it might be a microscopic airborne intelligent entity of some kind. Not unlike the spore farm that produced Vanna White, just for reference. I do wonder if interior design is going to be all that's left for humanity at some point, though, once they perfect microwavable pancakes and the sort. All right, let's adjust the old rule and read on our astrolab and set course for our own familiar sectors, if we may. Friends of the show, we'll start with Chastity Hushwood. She is 41 today. I do not get up to Vermont enough, but I understand that she's not the only practitioner of muscle shell-based time travel. It has a clear and amazing upside, but I could not deal with the smell, even if I could go back and meet Aaron Burr. Speaking of timescales, we'll be celebrating the 100th anniversary of the 1893 Chicago's World Fair here in 4 years or so. Many of you familiar with Chastity's story will know that she's unique in having visited not only the 1893, but also the 2093 World's Fair, the latter of which occurs in Podo, Oklahoma, which I've never heard of, but apparently gets huge a few years from now. And she possesses a pretty hefty amount of regret over failing to sample the same chap's cheese cup delicacy a century apart. All the same, Chastity of late has been struggling with really high levels of cornmeal in her bloodstream, which prevent her from resuming her time-traveling activities. The doctors don't have a clue what's going on. And from what I understand, she purifies daily in a tub of dry cornmeal, but I'm not sure if there's any correlation. So, happy birthday to her. Enigmatic New York City cryobotanist Ezra Thorne is 70. Speaking of afflictions, Ezra has been suffering with a monster bout of malaria the last 37 months. And I suggested that he pop back down to the Javari Valley, down Brazil way. Getting back to work is the best prescription for shaking off the big M. I speak from experience. It's easy as day to get down there, and you can take a riverboat the whole way. And he can link back with the Korobu, who are playing a little hard to get, to be honest with you. I think he could finally get a breakthrough on the self-proclaimed Bolivian whisper route. Now, having listened, and I do mean listened, to the sample that Dr. Thorne brought back of this root before it accidentally ended up in a Cobb salad, I agree with him that that sucker is clearly sentient. But I have to say, I don't think it's the secrets of the universe being whispered as he believes. The fact is that entropy, vortices, and cinnamon were some of the ponies running in a parlay over on the Northville Downs the same day we were chatting with the BWR. The verdict is still out, but much like the Shroud of Turin, I think it's likely gambling related. And that route's good for nothing but an extra 10 or 20 at the track. Tough news, but that's what friends do. So, happy birthday, Ezra. Lastly, psychic investigator Willa Quiver out of Nova Scotia is 33. She dropped us a letter not too long ago. Her psychically impregnated weather vane, Eduardo, who was her divining companion in her cold case investigations, got bent halfway to Halifax, being yanked out of the trunk of her 68 Buick helmet. Now, Eduardo, whom you might remember as the soul of a sickly fruit vendor from turn-of-the-century Andorra, still speaks, but it's in broken Korean. It's also all about the steer enclosure industry, which I know nothing about, but apparently it's also 100% incorrect, despite being super specific. Tough to land gigs with that kind of butter on your slacks. Well, I'll expand here on the advice I included in my Get Well Soon card that I shot back to her. You want to get a hold of some 80 grit and roughen Eduardo up a bit where he's bent. And mix up some of the discontinued Jack LaLanne Bondo I sent with the card and apply that in the gaps and bring it all down with a 36 grit mix and add your hardener and buzz it down one last time with a 80, 150, 180 combo until it's smooth as a mantis derriere. Simple black primer will do until you and Eduardo can discuss what color he wants to be. I feel good about your chances once you got that taken care of. I think you'll be finding bloating corpses in the swamp before Easter. So, good luck to you and happy birthday. Next, we will venture inside the minds of some of you that may be listening at this very moment. That will be letters coming up right after this message. We'll see you on the other side. I recently attended the funeral of a longtime friend, politician Tamale Reynolds. In keeping with his roots, the ceremony was heavy on Norse tradition, and had I not speared into and ruptured the cask of gravel, a beer of sorts, ferrying the burial party back from the gravesite, well, I had a thought-provoking eulogy planned. During the crucial seconds in which I lost control of the Ford Komodo, with the mortal screams of nearly a dozen new acquaintances behind me, I realized that I was not as prepared for the moment as I should have been. My mind and body were as sharp as you might expect, but an imbalance pervaded my senses. As the officiant soared magnificently away from my turning radius due to centrifugal forces, I recognized that something needed to change. In his own way, the officiant agreed with this and expressed this to me angrily before succumbing to his own injuries. Well, the fact is, every one of us need a mental oasis of some kind, a refuge that we travel to in our desperate hour. The older I've grown, the more I've embraced the mysterious and legendary practices of our neighbors far to the east. While my quest for the profoundly aromatic Himalayan molded lead orchid was innocent in its aims for spiritual gold, the quarterly removal of the remaining stalagmite fragments from my right thigh remind me that journey carries on. Well, folks, serial entrepreneur Chuck Katana is on that journey too, and he's bringing a new elite experience to several communities in greater West Virginia. In fact, if you live in the Charleston, Huntington, Morgantown, or Parkersburg metro areas, you may have noticed that your J. Jennings Calzone Experience locations have abruptly shuttered. Transformed may be a better word. Beginning May 1st, all of the familiar faces at your local Calzone Experience will have completed their intensive 4-hour coursework and will be welcoming you to the Emberflow Calzone Studio. Yogi and yogini alike will notice a different aura as they assume their positions on the comfortable, classic linoleum practitioner space. The delicious aroma of fresh calzone will waft past the rock and waterfall facade. Go ahead and grab one to enjoy as you transcend. You'll enjoy the same low prices that J. Jennings was famous for. The centerpiece of this experience is the Zen Flicker mat that you'll come to rest upon. As the calzone warms you inside, be purified and energized through the Zen Flicker's ancient space-age special combustible material that lightly smolders during use. You'll get twice the workout you need, as in order to avoid minor burns, you'll need to shift your body's surface exposure every 11.6 seconds. It's enlightenment through adrenaline, fueled by a legendary folded Italian delight. And get ready for this, membership is absolutely free. Sign the handy organ donation card at any Emberflow Calzone studio in the state of West Virginia, and they take care of the rest. Seating is limited, so you'll need to tell friends, family, and work colleagues that you're taking a 6-month sabbatical to Guam. Melt away your stress and indecision. Join the Sangha Italia today. Emberflow Calzone Studio. Taste inner peace. Yuri, that's phone. The middle one, Yuri, phone. Yeah. Thanks a lot. An update from our Sunday interview with Wraith Hunter Ivan Hoff. According to his landscaper, Kurt, he has been diagnosed with Ryukin cryoexcretory syndrome, RCS. Turns out the gelatinous excretions that eventually put the kibosh on our chat together were a complication of the Big Barty frozen fudge bars we ate prior to airing. RCS apparently occurs when sweat glands are exposed to cold temperatures, and a whole series of effects arise from the excretory system's overzealous attempt to regulate body temperature through said excretions. As for the suspected trigger, mea culpa, we keep the Big Barties right around 6 degrees Fahrenheit, given the tendency of that product to invite black moth fungus. So it's a real no-win scenario. Ivan, I understand, is in quarantine at the Fort Lauderdale Bryn Derlin Gland Clinic. He wants everyone to know he's all good on the houndstooth pattern gauze and 24-ounce plastic cups. But he is running a little short on French onion soup mix. You can send soup packets or cash to Wraith Hunter Ivan Hoth, care of Dr. Beatrice Furlander, Bryn Derlin Gland Clinic. That's 5614 Blind Bishop Circle, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33301. I have purposely kept silent on a certain topic the last few weeks because I had a very, very eerie feeling. Real sausage and slippers stuff. Talking, of course, about the happenings of March 24th up near Prince William Sound. And since I met with Professor Skull Foreman on this program 12 years ago, in the spring of 77, it's been entirely clear to me that there is no motor oil native to planet Earth. Exhibit 1, we've known since they were making corduroy into go-go shorts that dinosaurs were not the source of crude oil deposits. Exhibit 2, dinosaurs would have to have actually perished in order for that to be true to begin with. It's been established repeatedly on this program and via the exceptional charcoal drawings of Artie Unifever that these behemoths still walk the earth, most of them just north of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. But that's old news. Exhibit 3, oil always has and continues to originate from one place only, that being past the orbit of Neptune on the planet Argentur, named after the musician Rod Argent, who has long been a shill for their Willy Wonder dish detergent, a product made exclusively on that icy world, of which I do not partake. Most of what we have used in our technology and industry fell to the earth in various waves, as what we refer to somewhat naively as asteroids, or very early on planetoids. But what were altogether in actuality at least 3 major Argenturian invasion flotillas, with the biggest push in the Mesozoic. Exhibit 4. The Argenturians have years ago placed a mark on me and this show, and through an extremely weak lawsuit that they paid F. Lee Bailey to take to the Lali Esposito Tribunal, supposedly on behalf of the people of Argentina, back in '86. That was the ludicrous capper. And a Jeff Healey tribute band would have been able to see that I was in no way referring to the Argentinians in my ongoing commentary, and I certainly don't believe they are a protoplasmic race bent on physically penetrating our industry and technology in the guise of a convenient lubricant. And besides, anyone with a memory longer than a minute and who's read our newsletter knows that every man, woman, and child in Argentina serve at the behest of the massive subterranean Nahuelito de Bajo. And how exactly does an amorphous body formation plan to deliver the eggs of tens of thousands of chickens each morning and ferry them, unbroken, 11 miles under the streets of Buenos Aires to prevent sure incineration of their people? It's pretty shameful to drag the good name of the everyday Argentinian through the streets like a sheet of Charmin on the heel of an arrogant mail carrier with ridiculous theories like this. And we prevailed, mostly thanks to the letter-writing campaigns of the folks that listen to this show and the none too subtle backdoor lobbying campaign of actress Holly Hunter, who unfortunately has since also filed a lawsuit against this show, claiming that she was led to believe that she was donating her time on behalf of children's leukemia research. I do truly wish some of these celebrities would loosen up a little, concentrate less on the photo op with the bald 6-year-old, and a bit more on the existential threat to human civilization. Self-awareness, people, it is in short supply. As for the Exxon Valdez, I tell the president and every member of Congress that they're looking at the wrong shipwreck. I don't have a bloodlust about this, but war is war, and every Argenturian that went down in Prince William is one less that'll be coming up the commode when it finally hits the fan. All right, first letter this evening comes to us from Ballpeen, New Mexico. Interestingly, the birthplace of homicidal folk singer Chip Factor, if you didn't know. This letter from Blue Jacobson. Blue writes us, Dear Colonel Prather, my name is Blue Jacobson, and I am a rancher living and working 2 miles northwest of Ballpeen, New Mexico, where I have a head of around 80 Donald Regan steer. This is far and above what I would normally manage with our native foliage and rainfall, thanks to my purchase of Cham Whitley's polonium green, which you've advertised frequently on your show. All right, Cham. Thanks to this, I managed to secure a reasonable profit, and that held for a handful of years until last June when the Paper Roses float at the Anita Bryant Fuchsia Fever Fest caught fire and burned a third of our already modest downtown. Many here looked at this as a supernatural occurrence, as the fire left a cow-shaped hole in the side of the historic beauty pageant bakery building. I generally forgot the incident until last fall when cattle began disappearing from my paddock. Colonel Prather, you have frequently discussed cattle disappearances, but these bovine, my cows, have been reemerging in the local community, fighting what they refer to as extradition back to, quote, a barbaric prison where death is the only release. Their phrasing, not mine. Our cattle's very visible and vocal presence in the community has seen a collapse of local demand for meat and even milk. In a show of solidarity, Pick Romans, the chairman of the American Beef Institute, held a press conference on my front porch to eat at Porterhouse in view of various local media, but violently regurgitated when a family of cattle dressed in office casual showed up taking pictures. I've never attended church, but of late have been reading my Bible out of comfort given this spate of disturbing circumstances. As I speak, my property is inundated on the east by traffic noise from a car dealership started by a couple of my former grazing cattle named Two Heifers. Writing to you is my last resort, and while I can fall back to commercial cosmetics testing, I am sensitive to odors and have to take frequent breaks. With no offense to my real Lord and Savior, I am hoping you can act quickly enough to avoid repossession of my Honda CR-V. With prayerful pause, Blue. Thanks for your letter, Blue. I won't lie, your situation leaves me slightly intellectually constipated. I do a full-body moisturizing daily and precisely for these moments, and, I think I have something of a lightning stroke. The good news is that we go straight back to Cham Whitley on this one. Cham offers, among his vast catalog, vitamin supplements. And Blue, I have got to tell you, one of my favorites is Majestic New Guinean Vampire, MNGV for short. This is great stuff. You dose it monthly in a fist-sized ball of uncooked ground beef, which I think you'll appreciate. As the name suggests, MNGV utilizes a concept originally credited to a Cambodian sitcom. This Dao Suk effect channels the energy of any living being into your small intestine for 3 hours and 14 minutes. I attended one of Sly and the Family Stone's last gigs 2 years ago on this stuff. And not only was I clear-headed, but Sly up and played the Melissa Manchester Better Days and Happy Endings album in its entirety at about half speed. They had to medevac half the crowd out of there. I'm happy to say that my shorts were dry. Now, MNGV, if you're curious, only runs about $3 for a year supply, so I can't recommend it enough. You start popping this stuff, and trust me, you will end up with a very disinterested and unmotivated herd begging for the grinder. You do have to order it on Cambodian soil, and don't let it touch your skin. We'll be sending you the physical address to the Cambodian embassy in Algeria. Good luck. Appreciate the note. All right. Our second letter is from Dr. Maggie Morrow, writing from aboard the HMS Torvald, somewhere in the mid-Atlantic. Dear Colonel Prather, I am a doctor of congenital suspicious medicine at the Polypenino Pedestrian Institute of Medicine in King of Prussia, currently on extended research sabbatical. As I pen this, we are in a stretch of unforgiving sea on our third attempt to circle the globe using a psychically impregnated North Carolinian little pine topaz. This has been placed in a small box on the bridge, seated on a photo of actor Robin Thicke. The owner of this psychic presence is a long-deceased celebrity tarot reader from the early 20th century, Jonah Thornfield Myers. She continues, sir. Regrettably, my own research seems to have come up short in this affair, as the late Mr. Myers has an affinity for the Madagascar vagabond shark. The Madagascar vagabond, it seems, is extraordinarily adaptive, and there are few places on the globe where we do not encounter it. Sadly, when these rendezvous do occur, the ship, guided by Mr. Meyer's incorporeal libido, will follow Madagascar until the prurient desires subside. As we did not bring any backup navigation aids, we find ourselves at the mercy of this salacious wanderlust. Given that a physical consummation cannot occur, the little pine topaz on board refuses to allow us to dock. After a spirited and at times violent argument aboard the Torvald, we determined that while it would be most advantageous to radio rescue authorities, we eventually surmised that our story might leave rescue vessels perplexed and unresponsive. More critically, Captain Igmore also has a habit of playing insidious pranks on governmental and private aid organizations who operate in the Atlantic, many of whom refer to him as, well, give this a shot, Kachu Yamazoga Yawanyama Walayova, Swahili for lever of clothed animal carcasses. When we most recently rafted with a Norwegian spinach trawler to stock up on sock, band-aids, and blow, we handed off this letter. This after we elected not to disembark and return to port with them, as their bunks have no separate fitted sheets. She closes here. By the time they offered to radio for assistance, Captain Igmore had coated their console in Louisiana chamomile honey. We have a few weeks before we resort to cannibalism. Until then, we are shooting off our plentiful supply of flares inside the galley to entertain ourselves. There's a note here on the envelope. Let's see. I am a carrot. Love, Captain Igmore. Well, big thank you for the letter. It's always great to hear from boat people, even if they're not really boat people. Deepest sympathies also for your situation. I think, music can be a real healer in these scenarios. When Marisol was in traction after her run-in with the Peretti brothers, she found comfort through repeated listens to A Stray Heart by Captain Beefheart. I had a brief legal action taken against me by a vocal ensemble called the Melancholic Albatrosses. And you want to talk about a sound that makes you forget if you've gone to the bathroom, brother, it is straight on ethereal. Now, they do a cover of Lowlands Away that will get a crippled Lutheran violent. So my standard prescription here is pretty simple. Pick up their album, Dark Voids, live in Tucson, at your earliest convenience. As it seems your traditional means of acquisition might prove difficult, I've arranged for a special broadcast of the album, extrapolating your position from the coordinates you included in your letter. Barbara Hale's birthday is coming up on the 18th, which we would usually do something special for, and at midnight, local time, tune your ship's radio frequency to 108.9 megahertz to receive my personal gift. Sounds like the Topaz has some issues to work through, but this will make the whole situation go down a lot easier. Good luck out there. Third and final letter hails from Mirth Terrace, Utah. Dear Colonel, my name is Gregory Pendle, and I have the singular honor of serving as our town's municipal events coordinator, where I have been a tireless advocate for the majestic woodlouse. Next to my near relationship with Calvetta Purser in 1980, the highlight of my 41 years was to express my admiration for the woodlouse in the form of the Puparia Purity Procession, a 3-day festival showcasing the significant ecological role of the woodlouse in decomposing organic matter and their unique ability, to roll into a ball when threatened. A clear analog to the uncompromising courage of our Mirth Terrace founders. A centerpiece of this festival is the Decomposition Derby, where groups of children and adults alike are encouraged to partially chew and regurgitate various paper products, with each contestant forming these into the most efficient woodlouse habitats to be judged by an esteemed unnamed local expert. The winner will spend a night in the E.O. Wilson Insect Pit. Despite the clear and compelling cultural value of this, when the full town council returned this week following their mistaken imprisonment in New Guinea, while on a yam cultivation fact-finding mission, they pretended unconvincingly to be shocked that plans were already underway for these events and began phoning vendors to reverse all of the painstaking preparations I have spent the last few months arranging. In the interest of transparency, I will reveal that I have no great history of listening to your show. I was setting a radio delay detonator to trigger the explosives I have planted throughout the city when I inadvertently picked up your broadcast. I was touched by the advice you gave the young woman from Vancouver who was dangerously close to giving up her dream of translating all 146 Hill Street Blues teleplays into Klingon. Wendy from Vancouver. Remember that, Yuri? She had 2 extra toes. I don't remember which foot. He goes on here. The whole experience has me realizing that I was being a little hasty, so I'm going to give this letter a full year to be responded to before resuming my plan to destroy my beloved hometown. He concludes here, your actions will likely save the lives of the 1,207 residents of Mirth Terrace, and I can't tell you how pleased that makes me. I tend to speak in Latin when I'm jubilant. I will add that the Latin word lepisma refers to a type of primitive wingless insect often associated with silverfish, but it can be used in a broad sense for small insects like woodlouse, which are more accurately part of the order Isopoda. Therefore, I will close with a hearty Vivat Lepisma, hoping Hades I got that right, and look forward to your response, which I'm confident will arrive long before April 10th, 1989. All right. Well, folks, when we return, we sit down with shape-shifting claims adjuster Victor Morgan Green. I think you're going to be blown away by this guy, so do stick around. We should never feel ashamed of our success in this world, but I do admit as time goes on, I tend to lose that sense of what struggling was all about. I benefited greatly from the deceiving physique and sharp intellect honed in my early lean years, but sometimes I feel like I need to be back out on the streets of Petoskey hustling vinyl scraps and collecting for the sisters. Those days are gone, of course, but the fight-or-flight stimulation of that everyday precariousness need not be given up for good thanks to poverty bites from new manta ray industries. Pop them before or after dinner, at the office, the beach, or on the go. Each bite-sized morsel is crafted to evoke the essence of frugality, ingenuity, and the raw survival instinct that can only be forged in the crucible of economic hardship. Poverty bites send you careening down a lane paved with the gritty realities of making ends meet. Remember those? You'll feel the rush of finding $1 in the street, running between houses to escape an enraged grifter, or the simple triumph of crafting 2 nappies from a single diaper, all from the comfort of your current existence. Eviction elderberry is my current favorite, but let me tell you there are dozens to choose from, and more being added each day, from refreshing balanced stew banana to savory summon spaghetti. Get your 16-ounce bag for just $49.99. If you're still climbing the ladder yourself, New Manta Ray Industries offers the string of checks option to pay for your poverty bites over a 16-month, you heard that right, 16 months at a competitive interest rate payback ease of mind program. All financial terms communicated on agreement and the full weight and power of the rule of law apply in any necessary penalty orchestration. Better still, with each purchase, a portion of proceeds are directed to Austrian multimillionaire Gustav Schoenberg, whose companies are in the early stages of developing a variant of the ATM that may have the potential to expand access to financial liquidity for poverty-adjacent corporate entities. For those best equipped to make use of this opportunity, call 1-800-438-7667 or 1-800-GET-POOR. Our operators are standing by to accept your order via American Express, Diners Club, Visa, MasterCard, personal or cashier's check for individual or orders by the case. For those still on the path to wealth, interested in the string of checks option, call 1-800-426-7667 or 1-800-IM-POOR to speak with the intake department. Don't let your comfortable life dull your edge. Grab a pack of poverty bites today and nibble your way back to the roots of resilience. Folks, it's time to chew on the tough stuff, poverty bites, because sometimes you need to taste hardship to truly appreciate your feast. A bit of housekeeping before we have our chat with Victor. I just got a call from Perky Underseer. at the Jackknife Auto Body down in Perseverance, Iowa. If you happen to be driving an 81 Mercury Lynx with deteriorating interior, you might want to pull over for a minute and give this a listen. It's well known that I'm a huge fan of breakfast cereal, and in particular, Big Stu Copeland's Happy Hearty Tarts. Known for their impressive allotment of magnesium-based fire retardant. And if you're not a fan of spontaneous combustion, it's a no-brainer way to kick off your day. We've naturally been following developments in Bhutan after that mess with the Fabian concert. As we confirmed, he is a big fan of HHT. Sad to say, it looks like Copeland's breakfast delicacy has been linked to another dozen or so electromagnetic disturbances, this time stateside. Apparently, if you have enough HHT in your diet with an anti-weathering undercoating applied by Cariner Brothers at any of their 2,400 locations worldwide between 1956 and 1988, particulates in said undercoating have an unreal tendency to bond with any undigested HHT in the guts of the drivers or passengers of such vehicles. It can cause movement or deformation of bodily matter that may impede the path of the ongoing magnetic and electrochemical reaction. Now, the press have been their normal alarmist selves on this one. Now, we're not interested in hiding the truth on this program, and it's 100% true that Paula Forenfield did end up with both arms on one side. The question I have is, has anyone asked her if that's actually more convenient? And, they're a little blurry, but if you look at the photos from Fabian's gig, which I mentioned a minute ago, I'm not sure if that isn't an improvement. This was an objectively handsome guy already, but who doesn't want a more prominent forehead? Most of these people are going to be fine as soon as a few medical techniques work their way out of the conceptual phase. And I have to say, I'm nervous as a tennis coach that Bush is going to knuckle under like he did with acid rain. And we're going to see a great breakfast option taken off the shelf. Either way, if you are driving an 81 Mercury Lynx, especially light fawn, or most every other car on the road, a bit of caution is not a bad thing until this blows over. We will keep you updated on that whole situation. We first started having conversations with my next guest 11 years ago. Doesn't seem like it's been that long, but we are pleased to have back Lansing's own Senior Claims Adjuster for Unintended Endemic Casualty Unlimited, Victor Morgan Green. Thank you for joining us again.
Colonel, what do you know about the people that run the Valley Variety Mart off Paradise Parkway?
Just a couple of low-grade commies. Edie and Lewin, they keep their croissants out well past expiration. I got desperate one night, finishing up late after open lines, and choked one down. Felt like it was lodged in my hip.
Edie is the female.
Lewin is the female.
Have you had a close look at her eyes?
I didn't realize she could remove them.
Does the name Principi Averus Catalan mean anything to you?
Well, if it's about the Sears outlet again, I paid for the pants. I just don't have a receipt.
You should know that Principi Averus Catalan is dead. When I was a boy, the barber kept leeches in a jar. They used them to treat black eyes. The old kings of England used them for all sorts of things.
I guess there's no harm in saying there is a chance I might not have paid for the pants.
My father was a plumber.
Sure. You mentioned it a lot. Very accomplished. You pioneered lactose-based sprinkler additives, baited me a pharaoh.
When I consummated my physical promise with my beautiful Arlene in an Akron bungalow, my father's words came surging back into my mind like an exhaust suddenly released inside of me. Wear the clog of ignorance, my boy, for it obstructs the free flow of wisdom just as surely as debris blocks the water's path. Vigilance is the plunger of enlightenment.
Yeah, good words. Did Arlene make the trip? She's free to sit in if you like.
She's following her own conduit. I haven't seen her in 7 years. I mentioned it the last time we spoke, I believe. You recommended a bounty hunter.
Sure, that Hopi guy. I think he ended up incorporating him into the Haunted Mesa. That's a good little book.
Sad to say, friend, that was Louis L'Amour.
Well, it's rare you can use someone's real name. You tend to wave off praise. But on the nonfiction end, I've been having a rotation of local laborers read your latest Soul Extrusions, Volume 4, to me in the backyard through the chain link. And hands down, those observations are the best commentary I've seen on the ideal relationship.
I hate to be dramatic, but it's not the latest anymore.
Soul Extrusions 5.
Subtitle, Shark Force Trauma.
Shark Force Trauma.
Shark Force Trauma. Naturally, it's about out-of-body experiences, among other things. I waited 3 months to focus on it, but had to finish up a book I wrote about my bartender, Mickey.
Right, the Porcelain Flame.
Porcelain Flame is about my mother's bartender, Hawthorne. I'm talking about The Wretched Country. That's Mickey's book.
Sure.
You're a man of enemies, are you not?
I have a lot of folks that have threatened to kill or incapacitate me, but I'm not sure if they qualify as enemies.
Speaking for myself, I have a great many enemies, to the point of distraction. Cost of an extraordinary life. I mentioned in the beginning of Volume 5 a great struggle with my neighbor in Santa Monica, John Parley Framer. Outside of our own rendezvous, I understand him to be a flight nurse, his occupation for years. He went freelance when Braniff hit its own kill switch.
Your manager, Mindy Primafazzi, suggested that you live in Billings, Montana, so how do those things come together?
And Pierre Lorry's old castle, yes. But I have small tool sheds in several states. You never know what can come up.
Sure.
This Framer fellow insists on trimming the purple needle grass around my beloved little shack. Looks at himself as a Samaritan of one type or another. He treats the plant life on my plot like some sort of common weed, but I couldn't disagree more. Simple, yes, but it has a basic beauty to it, like a soldered nest of copper pipes. I wouldn't be surprised if it were to be made the state grass of California, if ever such a thing might come to pass. In fact, they did this in Kansas a couple of years back with the blue grama, in case you doubt my sanity.
Well, Kansas is notoriously liberal, so I'm not shocked. The blue grama is among the most venomous of the marmots, if I'm right.
It's grass, my boy, and singular. Botella gracilis. Mr. Framer constantly harps about the ease with which my own purple needlegrass can catch fire. The fact is that I mean it to be highly flammable. It's the first line of defense.
Sure.
Thieves tend to smoke. I can attest this, having met and employed such men and women frequently. Poor Libby Tarkington comes to mind, burned up in a field of buffalo grass, hunting an ex-editor of mine near Malopo.
Norway.
South Africa. Libby's dear memory reminds me of a very real spiritual calling that has guided me in assembling this latest volume. In order for us to achieve true balance, we have to see and understand all the realms around us. Clear the sink trap, as my father used to scream.
Shark Force Trauma is a how-to for out-of-body experiences, then, it sounds like.
That's a dry way of putting it. I lead with the stories of my own experiences, of course. Many of these are material I left out of the equine conspiracy. Naturally, the act begins to fold in on itself like any pursuit. Once one harnesses the OBE, it's a tad addictive, though. I admit an ambiguity washing over me the first few times out. I recall with no small satchel of guilt the distraction I brought to a French prostitute on her way home from a politician's house. She fell and fractured her upper right incisor.
I don't have the urn it was kept in any longer, but if memory serves, according to the April 1985 paper from the Cheech-Marin Institute, it's not unusual for OBE states to linger once connection is established to a remote person or location.
True. An interesting paper, but it focuses too much on the Peruvian method, I've found. Okay. Whereas I've taken a much more modern approach, in my opinion. Not only is my formula less exotic, but these are household items available to large sectors of the public. Spaghetti strainers, garbage bags, oven cleaners, surgical tubing, and the like. The apparatus achieves a vivid clarity beyond even the dreams of Sylvan Muldoon. One has only to wrap in a silk sheet about their body and have that be around 400 thread count in a sateen weave. Recite some of the Skeeter Davis lyrics from the book and you're all set.
This is out of the mainstream, but I've always felt that time travel could be coupled with OBE. The last time I floated up to my ceiling using the Lebanese red method, I could sense that I was looking at my ceiling as it was 4 years ago, maybe longer.
I wholeheartedly believe it's possible. Frankly, as I watched John Framer undress in front of me over several months, many things revealed themselves. Proof, principally, he's put on a little weight in the last year. Secondary to this, he's no longer as hot on Chuck Mangione. And yet, there on the wall, I see no Yanni, but old Chuck having returned. Well, these things don't just happen. The modified contours of Framer's buttocks alone suggested at least 8 or 9 months of backwards travel. The regression in musical preference speaks for itself. It's an astonishing thing in any era to witness unguarded nudity, although it doesn't compare to the experience of something like a Pearson salted nut roll, if I'm totally truthful.
I often have to have something sweet after I've stumbled onto nudity.
I don't wish to besmirch the work of Robert Monroe or the Monroe Institute for that matter, but I believe in a challenging, invigorating approach to OBE.
Sure.
If you've ever had a voluntary enema, you know of what I speak. No, vengeance was my only aim, and I am transparent on this count. I was the matador and he was the bull. Don't get me wrong, I stopped short of bursting the main line, but I wanted this imbecile to really feel life was stacked against him. I followed him around for months, as I said, listening to his grievances and particularly his disagreements with others. I last settled on one involving the color of a shirt he wore to his 7-year-old son's birthday party.
Did his son live?
No physical harm came to the boy whatsoever. Well, this conceit took no time at all, spending most of my nights spying on their household to determine that John Framer was lying about the shirt he wore that day. Some days later, his wife was gathering laundry and, remembering it, asked him for it. He couldn't give it up at that point because the very night of his son's celebration, Framer had absconded away with a young Cuban named Plotto.
Plotto?
Plotto. It's like saying the word plot, except you don't stop. I knew this was my opportunity and gathered the shirt from a nearby dumpster. I created a garish creature out of balloons and electrical tape and stretched his tainted polo over the top of it with a photo of Linda Hunt taped to the de facto head. I placed it in the family room in a prone position, suspended by neckties, surrounded by rose petals with Authentic Sound Effects Volume 1 playing on the Thorns in the background.
Fidelity records. My mother confirmed a few years back my stepsister, Bernice, was conceived to bowling alley sequence.
I came in on an early version of Door Buzzer myself. My actions against John Framer had a slightly different mood, stylistically. I barricaded myself and I was viewing remotely. I can confirm that Christmas, 1985, Framer family came downstairs while Throaty Carhorn was playing. Quite the carnival of horrors staring into their souls, or so I believed. Unsurprisingly, the children's screams brought the neighbors and eventually the volunteer fire brigade.
Well, every victory carries the risk of casualties, one type or another.
Sad to say I was cheated of that. The couple incorporated my balloon creature into their regular lovemaking. A personal defeat, but a victory for logistics, I suppose.
That is something. That is something. Folks, we will continue this conversation after a quick word about one of our sponsors. Back after this with more from Victor Morgan Green. Have you noticed residue buildup on your bathroom and kitchen tiles? It's more than just unsightly. It's a breeding ground for Staphylococcus aureus, E. coli, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, and, understandably, clinical depression. Scrubbing for hours with ordinary cleaners can be tiresome, and for many of us, confusing when it isn't being done by a faceless laborer to whom we needn't promise emotional transparency. Well, fret no more, introducing Sparkle Blitz Tile Detonator, another revolutionary solution from Kinley Adair Studios that blasts away grime in a flash. Now, even I must admit, Sparkle Blitz involves a tad more excitement than your usual tile cleaner. The active ingredient, encapsulated nitrate pellets, mixed by the expert hands of anonymous Latvians from the purest ammonium nitrate, extruded lovingly into pellets and gently encapsulated using a Kinley Adair family recipe, dried and cured for your convenience. The potters have shaped their clay. All you need to do is just attach the Sparkle Blitz miniature charges around your tiles retreat to a safe distance, and watch as the dirt and grime are vaporized. Of course, setting explosives around the house might seem daunting, so why not disarm those misgivings by making it a family activity? Kids love a good show, and with Sparkle Blitz they can paint the charges, set the fuses, and learn about chemistry, all while helping out around the house. Just remember to have them wear the included Life to Shield goggles provided with your first order absolutely free. Life to Shield goggles consistently grade at 9 to 10% of the protection that properly made goggles deliver. Peace of mind meets zero cost to you. Caution is advised, though. Occasional use of Sparkle Blitz has been known to lead to chunks being taken out of tile faces, burned tile flanks, broken handles, and hairline fractures and handle joints in the blast zone, basin discoloration, and in rare instances, complete disfigurement of your kitchen or bath can occur. Folks, call 1-800-868-9274 or 1-800-TNT-WASH to order yours for a low introductory cost of $85.99, just $85.99. Checks are accepted, but use your Diners Club, Gimbals, or Japan Credit Bureau card, and we'll throw in a free juvenile fit first aid kit and a pocket guide to help with the translations from the original Central Thai Siamese instructions. Why slave away with sponges and scrubbers when you can obliterate dirt with the Sparkle Blitz Tile Detonator? Another modern wonder from Kenley Adair Studios, who remind you not to wait. The clock is ticking on grime. Back with Victor Morgan Green. Victor, tell us a little about the Cosmopolitan articles.
Well, I have to disclose now that those articles were not written by me. Oh. In a fine piece of graft, a very talented individual managed to fool the folks at Cosmo and my own publicist.
Was this John Framer's work?
John Parley Framer? No, it was Principe Avaris Catalan.
Catalan, the dead guy.
No, that's a different Principe Catalan. This Principe Catalan is a grifter from Minneapolis. No relation. You cavort with the non-living a great deal. What do you think of this marking?
Let's see here. Well, it looks like your standard human bite mark.
Got that from my own mother, if you can believe it.
Was it over a plane seat? Both times I fought my mother physically were over plane seats.
Well, it's exceedingly difficult for my mother to get into plane seats as she's been dead 16 years. I do correspond with her using an OBE technique in the book named Black Mamba to connect with her via the astral plane.
I read that the Gap Band plan to use Yellow Madrid. Keep in touch when they start heading for the exits down the line.
We spoke earlier of vengeance. I will be the first to admit that my own penchant for it is a maternal inheritance. My mother Burnham was the belle of the ball, but she did hold on to bitterness, not unlike myself.
We increasingly hear that sort of thing harkening back to DNA these days.
I don't listen to rap music, but I do not condemn those who do.
Sure.
The rich fact is that on March 11th, 1973, hours before Mumsy would pass, I argued furiously with her in her room at the Cedar Embers Burn Center in Scottsdale.
Politics?
Shrimp. We were reviewing the menu and music for her wake, and had just agreed to split the ceremony between Sergio Mendez and more banjo-heavy numbers. I brought up the issue with using brown shrimp in the cocktails, and she lost it. Leapt out of her bed and pinned me. I would have been bound for the final drain myself if her IV had been a couple of inches longer. Her anger has not subsided, and bites like these are par for the course whenever I travel astrally.
Arguments are a tough way to end things. My great-grandfather had a real duck dragger with Charles Guiteau just before he was shot to death.
I think you may have that backwards. Guiteau shot John Garfield.
Oh, that's disappointing.
If it brings any relief, it took Garfield 2 months to die.
Well, that would explain why they're not touring anymore.
I brought a fresh copy of Volume 5 for your perusal.
Oh. Thank you, Victor, and it's inscribed to boot. Here's to your dreams becoming reality. Love, Ivan Boesky. This is fantastic. I like this chapter title, too, The Watchers.
You're quite welcome. If you read it within 22 days, you'll avoid penalties and only have to pay to ship it back to me.
All right, I gotta know. The Watchers sounds tantalizing. Now, I usually don't read books without hired labor. Is this a chapter about the Thule Society?
No.
The Priory of Sion? Gotta be.
A pornographic film.
Priory of Sion from Agent Lay in Lincoln's book. Holy Blood, Holy Grail.
Oh, no.
Daggone it.
It's probably the greatest and likewise most ironic discovery of my life. Whole hordes of our population parade themselves in front of our overseers, as it turns out.
Wedding shows.
The zoo, my boy, the zoological exposition.
All right.
What does every major city worldwide have snug right in their every middle? Why such insistence on lavish recreations of their supposed original habitats? Why no chickens or cows? Why the shortage of lobster?
Right.
If you investigate these so-called original habitats, you'll find quickly that the whole thing is a farce. Consider that on my own trip to Brownsville, wandering up the coast of Texas and into Louisiana, I scoured countless parking lots, apartment complexes, truly sprawling suburbs, and found not one sign of the Kemp's Ridley sea turtle. What of the black-footed ferret? Stellum nigripus. I visited every truck stop from Calgary, Alberta to can't remember the name of it, Mexico, and only had 4 pounds gained on sour balls and Nico wafers to speak for. I'm not foolish enough to believe there are no animals native to Earth. Sure. God gave us something to keep going, but these zoos contain ludicrous species that are the most obvious evidence of an extraterrestrial presence since they canceled Make Room for Daddy.
A day of infamy, my friend. I never put the pieces together, but the way I got stared down by a spider monkey the last time I was at the Pittsburgh Zoo, I mean, this has the smell of the arlithids all over it.
You've always had a divoted, moldable mind, but I happen to agree with you in part. It's a lock, in my opinion, between them and the chrysalides. My text leans towards the arlithids, though, given their obsession with taxidermy. They do have their clumsy biohydrogen bladders to worry about, but my real feeling is that they bioengineered these furries off-world and then parachuted them in. Sure. I mentioned in this chapter that balloons were spotted over London in 1827, just a year before the zoo opened to the public. Not a coincidence.
Well, look in here. Chapter 11, The Gray Beach Ball. What's that about?
That's technically a piece of fiction, but it's of value to any young man coming of age in a factory setting. I don't want to give anything away to potential readers, but my best friend dies at the end in an accidental beheading.
Chapter 26, The
Yard Day Sale. This is about the International Cotton Advisory Committee's role in reducing the richness and intensity of the male orgasm. I have no idea how the still-living Principe Catalan happened onto the same topic.
What's the official release date for Shark Force Drama here?
Well, my true aim is October 1966. I've been transmitting the details to my younger self through astral visits, but I seem to have been obsessed with woodworking back then, so it's slow going. At that age, I apparently didn't know who Jack Klugman was either, which has compromised a full 3 chapters. I may try Indianapolis in 1971. I worked as a security guard at the Harold Robbins Surprise Slide. Lots of downtime.
Well, all I can say is Godspeed. I look forward to remembering that you already released that book. We took most of the plastic cups you brought with you and gathered them in that milk crate, so you could take those right out with you there. Victor Morgan Green, ladies and gentlemen, you don't know if this time tomorrow, 23 years ago, we'll all have the memory of that amazing book you just wrote. Wild stuff. Speaking of wild, I must thank Terse and Heather, the new owners at the Coal Exchange, for the pheasant chips in strawberry sauce. Do yourself a favor. If you're in the area, and drop in to taste that delicacy. That will clean you out in 30 to 45 minutes tops. Well, naturally, my thanks to Stephanie for a skilled introduction and Yuri operating the boards. Tomorrow night, we will welcome Mary Bach-Michener, who will discuss her newest novel of Renaissance-era demonic evil, Brackish Wade, along with her public and frequently violent feud with fellow author Linda Prince Pine, frequent guest and fill-in host here on the program. Spray down the fabric, folks. It is going to be a ride. Until then, do not allow the ordinary distractions to thwart your search for wisdom and knowledge. All that and more may just be revealed beyond the near horizon. Good night.